Hey there, Vast Ice Pops. It's your man Steve here, and today I'm coming in front of the camera because I want to talk to you a little bit. Why do we play video games? I'm sure there's plenty of people who have asked that question over the years. I'm just going to give my personal take on it. I've been a gamer since 1990. That's 30 years ago. That's when I first played Super Mario Bros. On the NES. Now, I had Atari 2600 prior to this, but I liked playing it, but it was just a normal part of my everyday playing with my toys, play with my Thundercats, play with my Ninja Turtles, play with my, Atari 2600. When the NES hit my life, there was like a major paradigm shift. And I spent the overwhelming majority of my time playing Nintendo. So, as for why I play video games, it's been part of my normal for 30 years. Just part of my normal. Everybody's normal is different. That's part of mine. Also, this has been discussed by a lot of people, but there's this element of escapism. Jumping out of this reality into another reality. And living in that reality and playing in that reality and immersing yourself in that reality, whether it's Super Mario Brothers or Legend of Zelda, any of these games that allow you to jump in, have a goal, pursue that goal, and then feel some sense of accomplishment, which I guess gets into the point after escapism, which is having a sense of accomplishment when you actually do beat these games. But there's that. And then also just the sheer entertainment value. Which brings me into talking about why video games themselves are such a fantastic medium. And that's because, for me at least, they combine so many of the other elements or mediums that we consume, mostly as kids, but in some cases adults too. For example, when you're a kid, you love reading books. When you grow up, a lot of people love reading books. And lots of video games have a really compelling story. It's like living out a storybook that you yourself are controlling the pace of, and in some cases, even the direction of the story. It gives you an immense sense of power and an immense sense of ownership in the story that you're playing through. I think there's a strong appeal to being able to have that kind of sway over the direction of the story. For those of us who may not necessarily be gifted story writers, there are video games out there that allow us to sort of write our own story within a story, if that makes sense. And then, of course, you have, when you're a kid, and then for some people as adults, you have toys. Action figures, dolls, Legos, toy trucks, things like that. So video games, in many cases, allow you to engage in those same activities in a digital way. Whether it's action figures, like you have your hero character that can be customized with their weapons and equipment and run out and fight monsters, or you have dolls that have various cosmetic changes that you can make, and hairstyles and clothing and things like that. And then of course you have things like building blocks and Legos, and then you have games that are like Minecraft and Terraria and Dragon Quest Builders and things like that that allow you to play blocks but in a digital way. So there's video games out there that give you the ability to pursue that same type of entertainment and engagement. And then, of course, everybody loves music. And video games, often, 99.9% of them have music, and some video games have some of the most classic music that I listen to today. One of my favorite music tracks of all time is the Chemical Plant Zone from Sonic 2. And I'll listen to it, like any day. It never gets old. It never gets boring for me. And the idea of video game soundtracks is huge now. People will buy separate game soundtracks for their favorite games because they like listening to the music that much. And then you have the whole the artistry of the game, the artistry and the creativity that goes into it that you can appreciate. Like when you're a kid, you love to do arts and crafts, finger painting or paint by numbers, coloring, whatever it was. And then you jump into these games and you see that same creativity, albeit often done by other people. But then there's games that allow you in turn to be creative. You know, whether you have Microsoft Paint, probably at the most basic, and then you have games that allow you to create these amazing caricatures or amazing sculptures or other structures. You know, getting back to things like Minecraft that allow you to be creative in that way. So there's that too. You can show your creativity and your artistry and hone your craft using these video games. And I can see the appeal for a lot of people there. And then you also have movies and television. Everybody loves movies and TV in some capacity. And of course, games have had cinematic elements for a very long time. They come in the form of cutscenes or even FMV, full motion video sequences that show a portion of the story playing out in front of you. And of course, as gaming progressed, you know, the more elaborate and the more lifelike those cutscenes and FMV sequences became. And so there's a big appeal for those people who are really into drama or maybe even romance, things like that, that watch these games play out in a very cinematic way. And the more modern you get, the more cinematic the games tend to be. So you have these elements of storybooks, toys, music, art, and movies and television. And, you know, these are all things that we come to appreciate as kids, and then they all come together in video games. Video games, many video games, have all of these elements together, and it just allows you to jump into this world and play out whatever is in that world. And in a sense, it in a piece of your mind, perhaps it can take you back to childhood and evoke that childish sense of wonder that you got. Perhaps the first time you saw an airplane take off, or, you know, the first time you actually saw a big animal in person, or, you know, things like that. But for me, why do I play games? Because I like it. They're fun. They're entertaining. They're escapism for me. They're part of my everyday life. I can't overstate just what video games mean to me. And it becomes almost like a talent. And it's not to say that I'm particularly talented at video games in particular, or any one game. There are games that I consider myself really good at. But they say to become an expert at something, you need to do it for 10,000 hours. Well, I've easily played 10,000 hours worth of video games in my 30 years of gaming. So, does that make me an expert? I don't know. But that's all there really is to it. Video games have become more and more mainstream as the years have progressed. But you don't see a wildly mainstream appreciation for video games that the way you do for movies and television and things like that. I don't know if we'll ever see that in my lifetime. I hope we do. Some people would like to argue, well, you can't compare video games to movies and television. I mean, I think you can. I mean, you look at the credits of almost any video game, you've got credits like 5 miles long in a lot of these, and it's the same way with a lot of movies and TV. You look at the credits roll for, you know, your big blockbuster movies, and you see a credit roll that's a mile long. the production process is very, very similar. And especially in games, you have a lot of motion capture that goes on in front of cameras. So there's a lot of movie making elements that go into producing some of the top tier games out there. So this wasn't intended to turn into a soapbox for why video games deserve more mainstream attention, but that's, I guess, rolls into why I play games, because to me they're just as important and just as valid a medium of entertainment as music, movies, television, books, and, you know, all those things. That's just how I feel about it. I mean, you could feel free to disagree. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments. And here's to 30 years of gaming and hopefully 30 more. So you guys, you keep on gaming, and I'll see you guys in the next one.